So we have actually three separate vaccine mandate rules that have been issued by President Biden. The one we're talking about today is applicable to employers with 100 or more employees. That's enforced by OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and that requires employees to either be vaccinated by a certain date, which is currently February 9th, or they have to test weekly in order to continue working. That rule was issued November 5th. Almost immediately, there were about a half dozen lawsuits filed to stop it from taking place. There was initially a stay issued within a week or so by a federal court, and then right before Christmas, all of the different cases got consolidated by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which actually covers Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. There was a random lottery to see which court would hear it, and our court won. They dissolved a stay that had been issued right after the rule came out, and basically saying OSHA could go ahead and enforce the rule. So there was an immediate appeal. So that was done on December 17th, right before Christmas. And the compliance date, the first date was going to be January 4th. So everybody was left in disarray. And there was, of course, an immediate appeal to the Supreme Court, and they heard arguments this week or I think it was last week, but now, about whether to continue to re-put the stay back into place or continue to let the rule go forward. And that's where we are. We're waiting for that decision of, is this rule going to be stayed while they actually fight out the validity of OSHA's rule, or is it going to just go ahead and take effect while they make these legal arguments?
Okay, so that's kind of like the overarching thing and the
Right.
legalese behind all of that. But as individuals, I feel like the majority of people do work for a company that does have more than 100 employees. So this affects millions of not only people in the country but Ohioans actually.
Yes, yes.
Millions of people work for a company that has more than 100 employees. And they're kind of in limbo right now. Those who don't want to be vaccinated, the decision whether or not they're going to stay with their company based off of the decision that comes down, or try to find a new job or try to find a way to not get vaccinated, and then the people who do want to work in an environment where people are being tested regularly and or vaccinated. So what rights do employees have as we are in this limbo right now?
Yeah, it's a really difficult time for employees and frankly for employers. I typically represent employers, and I'm just hearing a lot of angst about what do we do now, and how do we put this rule into place when we don't know if it'll be here tomorrow. I don't have an easy answer for them, and for employees, I think they're kind of at the mercy of these legal processes as well. Obviously, they have a right to change jobs. That's always their right. But short of that, there's not a whole lot they can do. The one thing that a lot of people have done is they've requested an exemption from this policy based on a disability or a religious belief, and that's applicable to some people. And they've been making those requests to their employers all along, but until there's a rule that employers know they have to implement, that process is kind of on hold as well. So we're at the stage where, as an attorney, I'm advising my clients, just put the policy that OSHA mandated into place. Make sure your employees understand this could change tomorrow, and start collecting the information on who's vaccinated, who isn't, and who needs an exemption, and at least let those processes begin to work.
Because employers, whether or not there's an OSHA mandate or not, they have the right to do so, right?
Correct. It's pretty clear that they can mandate the vaccine. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has said you can make inquiries as to whether someone is vaccinated or not. That's not a prohibited medical inquiry. Doesn't violate HIPAA. Let's all be clear, HIPAA doesn't apply to private employers. So a little pet peeve of mine, but
Same.
but there are rules on confidentiality of medical information for employees that are governed by the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the EEOC, which implements that act, has said this is not a prohibited inquiry. You can ask if someone's vaccinated. Employer has a right to mandate vaccines. Right now, there was one lawsuit that resolved that early on in the pandemic. So I think the question is, for the employers who haven't wanted to do that and are now feeling like they have to because of the OSHA rule, they would like some guidance before they make that decision. And I think that's reasonable.
So if these employers are putting these rules in place, and say the Supreme Court said, puts that stay in, like you said, and the rules don't have to go through, they can walk it back. Because I mean, we've even seen independent companies who put the vaccine mandate into effect prior to the OSHA. President Biden mandate. I mean, one of the major hospitals in Cleveland has had to do that. So it's something that can be walked back, correct?
It can be walked back. I mean, that's not to say there won't be some employment loss in the middle of people who got angry and decided to quit or didn't want to comply, so they quit. Those are the casualties of this, right? But ultimately, they can walk the policy back and say, this is not the mandate right now, so we're not implementing this until we have to. And I think that's the position a lot of my clients are taking, big and small. They have an understanding of their employees, and a good percentage of them don't agree with what, either the vaccine or the masks, and they don't want it. And so employers are treading very carefully, a lot of them, in trying to keep their workforce in place that they desperately need and not losing employees while still complying with the law. So many of them have policies ready to go if if the Supreme Court rules one way, but they're not going to implement them until they get that word. And then others have implemented them with the understanding that they might pull it back. It's a hard way to do business, but that's where we're left.
What are the penalties if they choose not to implement it? I mean, do they get shut down? What are the repercussions? Because I know a lot of businesses, they're not anti-vaccine per se, they're just anti-government mandate of the vaccine.
Sure. Yeah, and I think right now we're kind of in a non-enforcement period by OSHA until that February. They want to see good faith compliance. They want to see steps taken towards that policy. So I think the employers who are writing policies and deciding whether to put them out, I think they're protecting themselves because they are taking those good faith steps. They're not going to be enforcing anything until that February 9th date that comes. My suspicion is if the Supreme Court says the rule can stay, there might be a little bit more wiggle room on those dates. So I don't see OSHA jumping in into compliance mode on this right away, knowing the mass confusion, knowing the unavailability of tests for people who need COVID-19 tests weekly. I mean, for anyone who's tried to take one, it's not an easy thing to get.
No, it's not. It's really especially hard right now. Follow-up question for you on oh shoot, I lost my train of thought here just a little bit. Why did I lose my question? I'm sorry.
That's okay. You were talking about enforcement mechanisms, and basically, I think there's going to be a little grace period there where they're going to start, but I don't think there's going to be massive enforcement right away.
Okay, so some have also suggested that it will be on workers that would be pressuring their companies into following these rules, those who want to be employed by people who do either require the vaccine or the testing, or maybe even their unions that are within those companies. Is that something you have heard? And can you maybe explain that a little bit more of the either the union or the individual advocacy?
Yes, and I have heard that, and I've heard it on both sides actually, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I've heard, employees are going to attorneys and union reps about the fact that they're going to have a vaccine, and about the fact that the employer's not implementing it fast enough. So I've heard both sides. But essentially, I think that's probably a correct assessment that if an OSHA gets a complaint from an individual employee, they're more likely to take action on an individual complaint rather than kind of a sweeping enforcement mechanism where they just check in on different employers, because they don't have the staffing to check in on all those employers. So they're much more likely to respond to a specific complaint at a particular workplace than they are to do, that large scale enforcement. So I think that's the more likely risk for employers, is an unhappy employee who's on one side or the other, and the employers are just caught in the middle. And that's where most of my clients are just trying to comply with the law as soon as we know what the law is.
So at the end of the day, this rule by the mandate by the Biden administration is an effort to get more people vaccinated, essentially. Right. So do you think more employees will lean towards putting a vaccine mandate in place so they don't have the hassle of that testing?
I think so. I think that remains to be seen a little bit when we see how many tests are available, and if they are finding that their employees can't get it, or they're going to be charged a ton of money to get it. I think that that's what will the effect will be. Now, we just heard that now insurers are going to have to pay for up to 8 tests. Well, that's 8 weeks of employment under this rule. That's not very long, but at least that delays the burden if they can cover it under insurance and not have to pay the cost of the tests. If that rule is finalized, and I'm not sure where it stands right now, I think that'll help. But I think ultimately, yeah, I think most employers, if they find that the testing is just not available or not feasible, they're ultimately just going to say, then get the vaccine or don't, you can't work here. And that's going to, I don't know what that's going to do to our economy when, employers, I'm hearing numbers as high as 50% who don't want to be vaccinated. So, it can be as low as 5%, it can be as high as 50, who knows? It could be more. And some companies estimate more, so who are opposed to the vaccine. So it depends on the location. And this just really is scary for a lot of businesses that just want to operate right now. It's a scary time.
Absolutely. Who will the burden for testing go on, the financial burden?
On the employee, because the OSHA rule says the employer does not have to pay it. So, I think that remains to be seen how that works out, because I don't know that employees can afford that cost every week.
I've gotten all free tests, so I honestly couldn't even tell you how much one of those box kits cost. Do you have an idea?
Yeah, I bought some this week actually, and I paid $30 for 2 tests.
Ooh.
So yeah, and it used to be less than that just a week ago.
Yeah, I know they gouged them.
The week before, I think it was more 25. I think you can still find them for $15, but there was an agreement with certain pharmacies to offer them at $15, and that agreement ended. So the prices are now going up. We're seeing a lot of gouging. So they're going to go up, 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 and up. That's the really scary thing. But having the employer provide the test, for all of its 100 employees, that's a huge cost as well. So OSHA kind of weighed that and said, well, the cost has to be on the employee. The employee could get vaccinated and avoid it. But that's putting a big burden on employees. And look, I get it. I get the need, for safety, and I understand that that workplaces need to be safe. So we're walking a balancing act here.